I'm Stephen Durfee. I'm a baking and pastry instructor at Culinary Institute of America at Greystone in the Napa Valley. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pie crust the heart-healthy way using canola oil to replace our saturated fat. Typically, pie crust might be made with lard or partially hydrogenated vegetable shortening or, of course, butter. The version we're going to show you today uses canola oil. Canola oil in two different forms. I'm actually going to make two different recipes. One will include almonds and use a frozen version of canola oil that I put in the freezer about 2 hours ago. It's in a solid form now, and we'll try to replicate the way that we mix shortening or butter into a pie crust, where we can have the fat stay in discrete small pieces and achieve a flaky product in the end. And then for those of you who are perhaps daunted by the idea of rolling out a pie crust, we're also going to include a version that can be merely pressed into the pan. It's easy, it's healthful, and it's delicious. So let's get started. For the first version, I'm actually going to use some sliced almonds. Almonds, of course, are very healthy as well, and including a little bit of almonds in your daily diet is recommended. Nut oils have a healthful quality. I'm going to grind them up in a food processor. You could also use almond flour, which is available in specialty food stores. This just takes a few seconds to grind up. We want the almonds to be in small pieces, but we want to avoid over blending the almonds, or some of their natural oil could come out and they could become pasty. I'm just going to take it a little bit further. While the almonds are blending, let's go through the rest of our ingredients here. I have some regular all-purpose flour, a little bit of baking powder, which will help make the dough a little bit lighter in texture, some salt for flavoring. I have my canola oil, which is still in the freezer, some milk, a little bit of vinegar. Vinegar is occasionally added to pie crust doughs. It helps to keep the dough white and prevent oxidation, and it also helps to relax the gluten, which makes it easier to roll a pie crust. And then some egg and a little bit of water. Let's blend in the rest of our dry ingredients. In goes the flour. I have to say, it's really handy to be able to make pie crust in a food processor. And if you have made pie crust before, you know that one of the issues that we face generally is having your doughs become tough. And toughness from dough is a direct correlation to what we call gluten in a pie crust or in a dough. Gluten is formed when we take flour or wheat flour and add some water to it or any other form of moisture, and then mix it up, whether it's by kneading or whipping or agitating in one form or another. The way that you prevent gluten formation is to handle your dough minimally, and also through the introduction of fat, because fat will surround the protein structure of the dough, of the flour, and will help to keep the texture a little bit lighter, what we call shorter. So instead of having a pie crust that is going to perhaps be a little bit tough and maybe shrink when you put it into the oven, this one actually stays nice. The texture is still flaky, a little bit crumbly, and it doesn't shrink or lose its shape when you press it into the pan and make a nice fluted border. So I've ground up the almonds with the flour. It's pretty well distributed there now. I'm going to mix my moist ingredients here, which is milk and water, a little bit of vinegar, and an egg. I'm just doing it in this container. Makes it a little bit easier, and don't have to dirty another dish. I'm going to mix my my ingredients in this container. It's water and milk, egg, and a little bit of white vinegar, and just blend them together lightly. I just want to have this ready because the idea here with this particular recipe is we took the canola oil and put it in the freezer so that it's going to remain in small pieces, when we blend it in with the flour, instead of being absorbed by the flour, we hope that it'll be broken up into tiny little pieces. Traditionally with butter or lard or shortening, those pieces would be responsible for giving a pie crust its flaky quality. Of course, they also then load it up with saturated fats or even trans fats. So by replacing that other fat with canola oil, we can have a pie crust that's going to be much healthier in the end. Okay, I'm going to add the oil into the machine now. You can see it's in some chunk pieces here as opposed to being too liquid. We'll blend this very quickly. Once the oil has been distributed through the dry ingredients, I'm just going to carefully stream in my liquid and process only until it comes together, which is not very long, as you can see. This dough is somewhat soft, and of course the key to this particular recipe is to keep the oil from being absorbed into the flour. I'm going to take a little bit of flour onto my tabletop. See, the dough is nice and moist. It's going to be really easy to roll this dough out. I did discover that it's best to actually work with the dough right away. A lot of the times with pie crust, we're going to slow down the process by putting it into the refrigerator and allowing it to rest for a while, allow the dough to absorb some of its moisture. If we were to do that with this particular dough, the oil will melt out, and so it won't give us as nice of a texture. So I'm going to cut it in half. We're going to make two crusts out of this. So I could either make two single crust pies, or I could make one pie with a double crust, maybe a fruit pie of some sort. In order to roll it out, you want to have a wooden surface, or I have a nice cool marble here. You still may need a little bit of flour on the table to prevent the dough from sticking. Try not to use too much flour. You don't want to absorb too much more flour into the dough, or it can make it a little bit tough when we're done. But a little bit sprinkled across the tabletop will work, and I'll press it out into a round shape. It's a very soft dough. It's easily rolled. And as always with any dough, if you find that it's starting to stick because it's getting too warm, you can stop and stick it in the fridge for a few minutes. I'm trying to keep it from sticking to the table. It rolls out very easily. If you have difficulty rolling dough, one of the tricks that I teach students at the culinary school is to keep turning it, roll from the middle to the outside, and then keep turning the dough. That way you'll notice if it's stuck a little bit. Now, it helps to have a cool kitchen to work in. As I said, if your dough is starting to soften up, you can stop and just put it in the refrigerator. All right. Well, that's big enough to fit into a pan. So I'm going to roll it back onto my rolling pin. Pull it up off the table. This way I can see if it's stuck at all. And I'm going to lay it right out into our pan. Perfect. Gently lift up the edges. With this excess crust on the side, you can either trim it off with a pair of scissors, or we can fold it underneath to sort of build up the border, and we can make a nice little decorative edge by crimping it. Or you can take some of that dough and perhaps roll it out and make some decorations, cut out some little leaves or flowers, branches to decorate the top surface. I'm going to trim mine because I want to make a fluted border. There we go. I've trimmed the edges fairly evenly. I'm going to tuck that underneath. This crust also holds very well after it's baked. And it doesn't stale very easily. So you can keep it for a few days. Still have great flavor. Nice texture too. Once we've tucked in the border, whoops, I'll go and sort of mold it to fit the pan. Again, I'm trying to be delicate handling so that I don't develop too much elasticity in my dough. And then I'll go through and give it a quick decorative border just by using my fingertips. Now typically when we're making a pie crust by this method, using butter or using a shortening, you would need to chill the dough for a length of time so you prevent shrinkage when the dough bakes. And it might shrink away from the side of the pan, it might develop some toughness. Again, this dough I'm going to put into the freezer just for a few minutes to allow it to stabilize. Then we'll go right into the oven. I might commonly poke it with holes with a fork, a step we call docking. Docking allows any collected pockets of air that are underneath the pie crust to escape, so you will not have a problem with your dough rising up off the bottom of the pan and then not having even browning. So a few holes up. I'm going to go stick this in the freezer, and then right out of that, we'll line it with some paper and some baking beans. We're going to blind bake this crust and fill it with a custard filling. Here's our pie crust out of the oven. We blind bake this for about 15 minutes at 350 degrees, lining it first with a piece of parchment paper and some baking beans. You can see that it held the shape of the crimping very, very well. It's got a nice even browning all the way. And I'm now ready to fill this with a custard filling or a fruit filling. Back into the oven. We'll be all done.